Hey, Mike, what's up, my buddy? It's great to reconnect with you, man. It's been way too long.
You too, Mike. It's yeah, got to schedule an appointment with you if I want to have a conversation. Such a busy guy.
I'll send you my Calendly link. Um, no, man, I think the last time that we actually hung in person was what, maybe Confluence last year? Is that right?
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah, yeah.
that was a good time.
Oh, that was so fun. I'm really looking forward to going back again this year. It's really like one of the only events I'm doing this year. Meanwhile, you're staying pretty busy, huh? Before we hit record, you were telling me you're going to be flying all over the realm again this year.
Yeah, I've got a few things lined up. I'm going to Anarchapulco in Puerto Vallarta next month. They've changed locations. It's not in Acapulco now. And that's just an amazing lineup of people this year. So it's going to be a lot of fun to hang out with everybody. And then in April, I'm doing a meetup in England where I'll do a presentation, and then in June in Scotland. So I've got some fun things to look forward to.
Scotland. Will you be hanging out with our homie Steve Young, I assume?
Absolutely. He's one of the speakers, and I'm not sure, but I may end up staying a couple days at his place as well. Um, yeah, and that's in Edinburgh, so it's going to be nice to see some of that city. I've never been.
That's some ancient stuff there, huh? I know. I believe Steve Falconer met up with Steve Young, and they toured around. I think it was Edinburgh, and saw a bunch of like
Yeah.
Tartaria stuff.
Yeah, I saw some of the clips from that get together. That was fun. And Steve has obviously gone into a bunch of my material and seen a lot of the evidence that I presented on the big trees. And after that, he was pretty convinced that the famous castle in Edinburgh is actually sitting on top of the remains of one of the big trees. So it'd be interesting to see that with my own eyes.
That that concept blows my mind because I so when I drive through Southern Oregon up to our spot in Medford, there are these two mesas that's called Table Rock and Medford, and it's your classic flat topped mesa. They call them mesas, right? And
Plateaus. Yeah.
plateaus that are on top of a elevated rock formation. And it's clear when you look at that now with these open eyes, this understanding. And I try to tell my sons this. I'm like, look at those were cut down big trees over there, or something happened. But can't you see? Like, look at the striations on the side, and just imagine that being bark. And it obviously is very challenging to any conventional mine because we're talking about massive acreage here, right? Like these are very, very big.
Yeah.
Um, and so it's just hard to wrap your head around, like, wow, there's a potential in it. In the evidence, I will say, Mike, that you propose and other channels and researchers have proposed really is, it's hard to negate, right? It's like hard to say, like there's just so many questionable artifacts and visual sort of data that you see when you actually delve into this topic that conventional science can't explain
Mm.
from their current model. And it's just mind-blowing, man. Like,
Yeah,
yeah.
and the plateaus, the tabletop mountains, and the Tipuis, like the one that juts upward in Venezuela. That's I think the tallest of them. Angel falls from it. It's the tallest waterfall on Earth. Those are just one data point of many that I cover in my presentations, and it's compelling in and of itself, but it's not proof, But taken as a whole, when you see all of the other things that I've brought to the table and presented, it's a pretty compelling argument. And like you say, if you have the eyes to see it, it's just kind of it's obvious. You look at it and you go, yeah, it is what it appears to be, but we're taught that that's impossible, so we don't even recognize it for what it is.
Yeah, as a detective, looking at the scene of a crime, oftentimes it's about this idea of an orgy of evidence. It might not all connect and it might not all make sense, but it's hard to look, there's something there, right? And
Hmm.
it's why it's good to have an open mind and keep looking and keep sort of putting forth hypotheses, because I think as more researchers get involved, and this is why I love this idea of, and we're going to get in today about hacking and hacking reality. It's like this idea of the network effect, right? Where you have enough nodes of consciousness working on a specific problem, then those connections start to unfold into an actual real image of what potential truths are there, versus singular researchers that are kind of have their own biases and their own tunnel vision, can often get sort of trapped and lost in certain ways of thinking. But if we can sort of network affect this with a broad range of researchers, that are focused on sort of the same sort of free thinking, have the same free thinking appetite like we do, that is the new renaissance of science. And I will say it's been a pleasure knowing you and a lot of our friends, because I feel like we're kind of part of that emergence.
Mm. Yeah. When thinking of the hacking world, the whole idea of open source as a decentralization and kind of taking the power away from this ever growing tendency to centralization of power, that's an interesting idea in and of itself. And a friend of mine, Howard, here in Spain, who was really taken by my research, to the point where he's become more passionate about it than I am. He goes with all kinds of rocks to different events, and just speaks to the public about the subject of biogeology and introducing them. And he just finished like a 2-month tour of South America, going around and going to schools, and he brought over like a suitcase full of rocks to pretend. I'm like, I could not believe it when he sent me some pictures of one of these events, and I was like looking at the stone collection. I'm like, did you bring those with you? Like, are you absolutely nuts? You're gonna cart those rocks around, South America with you? And he was all into it, and he ended up leaving them behind because he had a couple of people that were so enamored of the ideas that they wanted to kind of further the spread of the knowledge. But the reason I bring him up is because he started describing what I was doing, with the Heartstones as an open source investigation, and that's what it is, because people have been sending me examples of stones that they've found from all around the world that are matching this pattern that I've been describing in detail on my channel now for several years. And yeah, so I really like that, and that's what truth is. That's what it should be, is an open source investigation where we're all pooling our resources and our knowledge and sharing things with each other, and then it leads to new discoveries.
Yeah, obviously a huge fan of anything open source, and this sort of idea of like crowdsourcing, the truth, and through, yeah, just open channels of, because when you think of like nature in itself and like how reality works, it is inherently open source, right? Nature herself, while she's a mysterious beauty, when and she's been defiled by the closed source corporatist scientism based world, but while she has a lot of mystery, when you have an inquisitive mind, it's all there. It's all there to be seen, and it's all accessible. In other words, in like a forest, I talk about this all the time. It's not like the trees have silos around them and have their own like sort of trademarked energetic patterns. No, they are unfolding into the mycelium and through the sort of internet of the forest floor in a very like open source manner, so that other life forms can engage. The squirrel can have its home in it, and it can take the nuts that fall, and then the birds nest in the trees, and it's all about sort of collaboration and openness, right? It's like it's very obvious, but yet man seems to need to like do the opposite, to control, to
Mm.
close down, to manufacture, to strip, to explode things. And that's sort of I do feel like we're sort of coming to an end to that in a weird way. I've been talking about like this idea of a renaissance actually emerging, and we have probably been living in the dark ages for a while now. And when we start to generalize things, we fall into traps as well. But how are you seeing the world right now coming? And I do want to get into your book today because I really loved it, The Hacker Prince, and I kind of want to start calling you Prince because that is your name. But
You can
um,
call me Prince. Go for it. That's fine.
artist formerly known as Prince. But yeah, like where do you see all this stuff going right now? I just saw a thing, like I guess in terms of like astrology, that Neptune is transiting now into Aries and out of Pisces, and it was like an interesting breakdown that sort of that last time that happened was in 1861, which was the start of the American Civil War. And
Mm.
you think of Aries, you think of war, of course, but also with Aries, you think of agency, you think of action, right? And it's the masculine sort of force of standing up in asserting will force. And it doesn't have to be just war. I think that might be a little bit of a psyop coming out of maybe, I don't know, the Roman legions wanting to dominate the world and putting that sort of archetype into that. But yeah, it was an interesting read. I'll share it actually on my Substack. But this idea that Neptune, which is a water sign, right, is about the sort of collective, unconscious emotions, moving into the fire sign of Aries. So there's some interesting contrast, but also sort of a very powerful shift happening right now. Are you
Mm.
seeing that in where you
Well,
are in your life?
yeah, and I'll just add a little bit to what you're saying from an astrological perspective is, Neptune is one of the transpersonal planets because it moves so slowly. So it's, it's along with Uranus and Pluto is all about societal transformation. So it's like a societal solvent. And so, yeah, it's a water sign, but I would hope that it would temper that fire warlike Aries energy.
Yes, yes, exactly. It's and so you said with those planets, you said Uranus, and what was the other
Yeah,
one? Pluto?
Pluto and Neptune. Those are considered transpersonal planets because they have such slow cycles that they're really marking generational change in society. So, as opposed to like Sun, Moon, Mercury, Venus, Mars, those are all the personal planets, and those
Well,
are those are moving far more quickly. And so, a person born a month later from another person is going to have a very different makeup in their astrological chart than somebody born a month before.
yes.
Whereas they're all going to have Uranus, Neptune, and Pluto more or less identical because those planets are moving so slowly.
Yeah, those are sort of defining the age, right, in terms
Yeah.
of the bigger cycles, because you have sort of the seven chakras that connect to the seven wonders, so you have what the Saturn, Jupiter, Mars, Sun, Venus, Mercury, and the Moon. And as you're saying,
Yeah.
those are like connected to your literal birth chart and everything. And then you have these other movers that sort of I like to call it like the collective destiny nodes. And
Mm.
those sort of, because I and I've gotten Steve Falconer into this book, but Thinking in Destiny, H.W. Percival, Harold Waldman Percival, who I've spoken at literally at Anarchapulco about, and this idea that we don't live in a fatalistic realm where everything is defined by these moving forces, but there is a as above so below, as below so above interrelationship between them and us and our will force and our agency. And so it's this beautiful sort of intertwined dance with the cosmos and the creator as we are individual nodes here that get to sort of like play in this and evolve in this and be work towards the more purified sort of expression of pure creation. And
Yeah.
yeah.
I don't see them as determinants. I see them more like lenses that are flavoring our experience. And solvents is also a good term because they're slowly moving around and they're disrupting the rigid aspects of society that need change and breaking that down over longer periods of time.
Oh, I like that. Yeah. Because it's definitely very obvious that boy does society like to stratify into rigidness and into, and also you have this idea of like control systems, right, and evil, and how that lends itself to you know, sort of the fall, this idea of the fall, and like man's just seemingly historical, like constant cyclical action of control and going against nature, and this is like nature's sort of balancing mechanism, right? To kick us in the ass and probably initiate resets and all that stuff as well.
Yeah.
So, but back to my question, how are you feeling right now? You're in Spain. How's life there? You know, is everything, because you know you look in the news, right, and you see all, if you do go on Instagram and stuff, and the algorithms feeding you, it's just like chaos, and you know here in
Mm.
the States, you know, you see all this protests and everything. But like for me here where I am at, it's quite peaceful. I'm surrounded by nature. My family, we're all good. You know, I surfed 4 days last week, which was pretty awesome. And you know, life's pretty good. Um,
Yeah. Yeah, it's amazing how, I mean, obviously, if you're unlucky enough to live in one of these war-torn parts of the world, then, it doesn't matter if you turn off your TV, it's still awful around you, probably.
mhm.
But in general, if you're not like jacked into the news cycle, life is pretty peaceful. I live in a very beautiful part of the world. I'm fortunate to have, mountains and sea so the less I pay attention to the broader world, the the less bothered I am by things.
Yeah, you were saying that you've taken up swimming and you've been swimming in the sea there.
Yeah, it's been amazing. I've never been much of a swimmer. I was a surfer when I was younger in California, um, and just never really enjoyed being in pools with chlorine. So I
Mm.
was never like one to go swim laps and long distances. But I have the sea right out in front of my office, and it just occurred to me about 4 months ago, like that's a gym out there. I can just start making use of that. And I've been doing cold showers for 8 or 9 years now, and I've really kind of built up my tolerance of the cold. So I was out swimming for a half an hour today. Did close to I don't know, close to a mile, and I'm just loving it. It's like I'm gliding through the water now. I've been doing it long enough that I'm feeling a strength that I've never felt. So that's awesome.
Mm. I love to swim. Swimming was actually what kind of got me back into the ocean to surf, because I started taking up swimming in our river here around that same idea where I got into Wim Hof. I started, Bearlando got me into the breath work and the cold showers and the ice baths. And then I was like, because I was always a total bitch when it came to cold growing up in Southern California, you know, it's like,
Yeah.
and moving up here, we have seasons, and my hands would get really cold, and I wanted to fish in the winter when the steelhead are running, and I was like, I got to figure this out. And also, I think it's just like great for your health, you know. And so then I got into swimming, and then that was like, man, I want to get back in the ocean, and I've always wanted to surf. And I will say, swimming in the oceans is just amazing because you've got a little bit more buoyancy from the salt, and
Mm.
it's just more exhilarating than being in a pool. You know, there's just, you're
Yeah.
surrounded in nature. You don't know what you might see under the water. It's like
Yeah. I've seen
it's
lots of fish and a few octopi, and I once saw a flying goonard. That was an amazing experience because I didn't even know they existed until I saw one. They have these electric blue wings,
Yes.
They're shaped like a wedge, and then when they open their wings up, they look like a bird. And so I saw it when it was in its wedge form, and I got up close to it thinking, is that one of these poisonous rockfish? I was like, what is that thing? And as I got closer, it opened up its wings, and they're not just blue, they're like electric blue. They basically like glow. I don't know if they're truly bioluminescent, but I saw that thing and I was like, what is this magical creature? And I came back to my office and I started searching and I found it, and it's like, wow, I didn't even know they existed until I saw one out in the wild. So that was pretty cool.
Yeah, you're not going to get that in a swimming pool. You may, in a public swimming pool, get a turd fish or something. but, yeah, I talk about this all the time. Is this like, there is just, like, we're meant to be fully engaged in all the elements. And unfortunately, modern man is stripped once again, going back to like what I was saying about how we just, for some reason, just have this, like, I don't know why we just separate ourselves from nature in order to conquer it. And yeah, if there, I don't think there's anything that probably could be more healthy than immersing yourself in a wild sea under the sun with the fresh air, and then like barefoot walking out onto the sand. You're getting all four of the main elementals attached, that you're immersing yourself with. You're engaging in your local waters and getting that information into your waters. The sun is charging your battery. I mean, don't you feel great?
Grounding.
Ground.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I get out of the water, and the first few minutes are like, ooh, am I really doing this? And then about halfway into the swim, I don't even notice the water, other than the fact that it's just like silky as I'm swimming through it. And by the time I get out, there's no, I feel no cold whatsoever, which is surprising because of how cold the water is. And people are walking by in jackets and scarves and gloves, and they're looking at me like I'm an absolute lunatic, and I'm just loving it. So and since I started doing the cold shower thing, my sleep was just it's been better than ever. And my immune function, if the immune system is a thing, almost never get cold. So I can highly recommend that as an addition to your lives out there, those who are listening. If you're not already doing it, it's a muscle that you build up, and the more you
Yes.
do it, the stronger it gets, and you get to a point where you're like, wow, I can't believe I was ever such a little wimp.
Oh man. Yeah, on the immune system thing, I like to say you're building up your resiliency,
Yeah.
as like in engaging in nature as we were supposed to, because we have such an amazing resilient machine here that we run, this biocomputer, whatever we want to call the body, and we pussified it through, through just being raised as like,
Wimpification.
yeah, exactly. And you know what I noticed after surfing, because I don't know what's your water temp there right now.
I don't even know. I keep
Fahrenheit.
meaning to look online, and I'm guessing it's probably around 15 degrees Celsius.
Okay, what would
I
that be
remember when I
Fahrenheit?
when I
I'm
used to live in
terrible at
Santa Barbara, I would surf at Rincon, and I remember I'd be out there in the winter in a 3 mil wetsuit, and there was one guy out there he was the only one, and he was out there for hours just in shorts, and in the middle of winter in the Pacific, and his skin would turn pink, and I just looked at that guy going, if I was like that, I'd last 5 minutes and I'd have hypothermia. And now I can understand how he did it, because you just keep doing it and you get better and better at it.
Yeah, so you're probably, if 15 degrees Celsius, I think it's about 59 degrees, 60 degrees Fahrenheit. So you might even be colder than that. Yeah, our right now the oceans here is 53 degrees Fahrenheit. So I wear a 4-3 wetsuit, but even, I'm out surfing for an hour and a half.
Hmm.
And so, you're definitely like in the elements for a long time. And I only bring that up because I've noticed when I do get out, and yeah, it's cold. People are wearing like, puffies, and it's sometimes in the 40s, 50s. It's the water is actually warmer than the air, and
Yeah.
yeah, and then I'm like warm. I'm wearing just a t-shirt and jeans and like flip-flops, and I'm walking around town, and people are in like beanies, and I'm doing my errands and stuff, and you just don't feel it. You're warm for a while.
Yeah.
It's really, it's really interesting. So yeah, like I think there's a great community that's around the Wim Hof stuff too. And I've gone to like, it's cool going to a lot of these events, and we really incorporated at Music and Sky is like, we try to get everybody into the ice bath. It's sort of
Yeah,
like a rite of
I loved it.
initiation. Did you do it at Music and Sky?
Yeah, yeah,
Nice, nice.
yeah. But
Um,
there was no ice left by the time I got in, so I would
oh,
have
so
liked
you
to
were
have been
just
one
in
of the
like,
early ones. It was just really cold water.
it was just hippie water at that point. It's just like,
Yeah, gray.
oh man. Hopefully, I know
No, it was awesome.
we do put hydrogen peroxide in the water, guys. So, uh, yeah, I just bring that up because like I love that there's like a full on community now around just even like ice bathing, you know, and reading your book, The Hacker Prince, which was so fun, man. Like, congratulations on this book, dude. It's just such a fun read. It's you literally fly through it, and it's true. It's like a true fun story, you know. It takes me back to my youth, and it's because I know you personally. I hear your voice ringing through the whole thing too.
I've heard that from a few people.
Yeah, so I'm chuckling a lot and seeing the Wilkie that I know as a kid having to, you know, figure out how to stretch a quarter as far as he can at the arcade, which, you know, that was my life, dude, growing up. I'm a little younger than you, but I guess what you consider an they call them what, exennials, zennial. So I'm like the last year of X generation. But
Ah,
and so I think, yeah, I was born in '78, so I think that might be the very last year, if you know, depending on how much, you know,
right.
stock
What do they say? 65 to something around there. I was
you,
born in 67, so I got pretty much all of Gen X.
you are the pure Gen X. So was your mom a boomer or from the Great Generation?
I would say she's a boomer. Yeah.
Okay, so she
Yeah,
had you pretty young because
she's about 80 now.
there's an interesting sort of idea that the X Geners that had the Great Generation parents were very different than those raised by boomers. And I mean, it makes sense because those are very like contrasting generations. Those who, you know, kind of came up through the
Totally. Yeah.
Great Depression and fought in World War II versus basically hippies and sort of the that whole boomer thing, which is also just marked with lots of contrast. But and I've been doing a lot of Substacks late, well, not a lot, but I've been talking about sort of generations and stuff and a bit this last year, and like how that could be a total psyop, you know, like trying to generalize us into
Pit us against each other.
yes, and into this idea that somehow like we're convention, it's like conventionalizing independent thought into groupthink, that like because I'm a millennial that I must be like this, and it's really archetypes, you know, it's fitting us into archetypes, but without the understanding that hey, we can move through 10 archetypes in a day, right? Like like I can be a fool, a hero, a magician in like this hour in this call, and and
I'm sure you will
um
be.
so but in this book what it is obvious though that there's still like we can't discount the fact that like where we come from and the times that we grow up in, and that there are obviously like similar experiences. Like you were older in the early 80s than I was just very young, but I still had those same experiences. I might have been 7 and you might have been 16 or whatever, but like it's funny, my friends and I were trying to do the same things, like trying to put slugs in the machines at Camelot, which was like our local um, miniature golf, you know,
Video
place.
game
But
spot.
yeah, like that was Southern California. That's where you went, right? Like it's literally in Karate Kid in the movie where he takes her on a date. It's like the putt putt. You might have a batting cages, and then you've got like a big castle or something with. We had 2 stories of of arcade video games,
Oh,
and it was paradise, dude. That was like where I always wanted to have my birthday party. I was always pumped when someone else had their birthday party there. It was pizza, Coke, and Atari, Nintendo, and all the great, stand-up video games, the original Punch Out, um,
Did they
the
have like the mini golf and bumper cars and
yeah.
go karts and the trampolines and all that? We had golf and stuff in Ventura, and in Ojai, my hometown. It was just like smaller arcades and a bowling alley, but golf and stuff, that was the place to go.
Golf and stuff. It was there for a long time. It's right off the 101. I'm not sure if it.
I think it's still there. I saw it last time I was there. I don't know if it's still going, but yeah.
Um,
There was a roller rink, like not roller blades, but like indoor. Can't remember what it was
oh
called, but
man,
that was still there too. I'm like, man, some things don't change.
I that was another sort of hallmark of my the first time I ever kissed a girl, or no, the first time I ever asked a girl to date me, to be my girlfriend, was at a roller rink. It was Colleen Smith. I was in seventh grade, and I pulled her over into the arcade, and I said, will you go out with me?" And she's like, "Okay." I was like, "Oh, it was such a win, you know?" And and I guess just sort of like I don't know, like because I have kids, you have kids, and just like my boys are going through that time right now, and it's just like what a different time now.
Yeah,
It's
they're all
just
doing it with phones in their hands and social media apps. Yeah, I mean, that's a talk about a generational difference. Like my kids were the first to grow up with a phone in their hands, even though I tried to put it off as long as possible. All of their friends' parents had, submitted far earlier than we did, but it gets to a certain point where the more you try to protect them, the more they hate you.
it's yeah. So they're millennials, right? and
Yeah.
uh, and yeah, they're the first generation, and there is total like stock in this idea that there are similarities with the generations because they experience these macro trends all at the same time, and they were the first really to like go. They were like the generation that actually had in their teenage years went through that like or even younger in their younger years that like transfer from maybe the a little bit of not having the internet or smartphones to total smartphone immersion, so you can see sort of like maybe why how kind of renegade they are and how like because they've kind of lived in both systems, and I think they're just so cynical about it all because they're like
Mm.
you sold us this like false promise that this was going to save us, and this was all like especially with like the whole neoliberalism front that came out of the 90s and the 2000s and stuff, and like they're all just like f you guys sold us out, and we're gonna go dye our hair blue and protest in the streets.
Oh, the
Oh,
years that take place in my book, there was no internet. I mean, there was computers, PCs, and telecommunications, but the infrastructure of the internet existed, in the form of the military-industrial complex and how that was linked into universities, and that's the backbone of our current internet today. But there were no browsers, there was no point and click, and so it was a very different time. I think it's amazing that when I think about my life and the things that I've experienced from young till now, I've really covered the gambit. I found out last week that my grandmother, who lived to be 102, she was a little girl and she actually was at the Chicago World's Fair.
oh
My
wow.
mom told me she had found a brochure from the fair, which she told me about it, but she wasn't sure where it is. So I'm hoping she can find it because I would love to see that.
Oh,
For all the alternative research when it comes to Tartaria and all that stuff with the World's Fairs. But she lived to be 102, and imagine like not horse and buggy, but she went with her husband young from Chicago to California. Go west, and they even had a sign on the back of their vehicle going to California. And I just think
Their
about
old jalopy they were probably driving.
yeah, and I just think about the lifespan that she had and all the changes that she saw in that 100 years, and it's hard to fathom the speed at which it's all changed, and I'm over half that age now, and I just reeling over how much things have changed just in the last 20, 30 years.
Yeah, it makes you think a bit about, like you were kind of alluding to with the World Fair, like this idea of a great reset and sort of, you know, control factors that come in to put this technological overlay over that maybe, you know, was intentional to destroy the true sort of more holistic technologies that were ever present across the realm. And we're seeing it all kind of come to a head now, right? With this sort of technological panopticon that seems to be taking over the world with with the sort of digital ID and the constant surveillance state and all that. You got to see this. So you were sort of like as a youth in this book, seeing the very, very, very beginning of this internet kind of unfolding. And it's interesting that you kind of were involved with, I mean, it was very much involved in the telecom industry and the telephone lines, right? You called it like freaking and this, and that was really the early where hacking came out of, right? There was the guy, what's his name, who kind of, it was in the 1950s, who
Captain Crunch.
Captain Crunch,
And
who,
yeah, and Joe Ingressia, also known as Joy Bubbles, he was a blind boy who was obsessed with telephones and was hearing all kinds of different sounds in the background, and contacted somebody at the phone company to like ask what it was he was hearing, and they let him know that, oh, these are the tones that are used by the computers behind the scenes, or computers, or the switching systems, because they
yeah.
weren't computers back then. It was all far more mechanical. And when he found that out, they created a monster, because he started learning how these tones were functioning and learned how to manipulate the phone system in different ways. And then Captain Crunch came along. He got his name because of in the Captain Crunch cereal boxes. At one point, they had a plastic whistle that was included in the cereal box, and when you blew on that whistle, it had a tone that was 2600 hertz, and that was the master tone for the whole phone network. So if you were speaking to an operator and you blew that tone, her trunk, which was like the line that she was on, would perceive that tone as your line had dropped. And so it would free her up to go to her next call, but you would be left on the line. And if you had the ability to make those behind the scenes tones and knew how to use them, you could do anything the telephone operator could do. So that was freaking. And it's a combination of the word phone with a PH and free, phone freak. So freaking. And it was essentially hacking the phone network. And yeah, the hacking, that was one of the ways in which it really began.
Isn't that such a trip that in that old analog world that just seems so ancient to us now, in a world of digital binary code that, and I'm thinking of like even the telegram, it was all this sort of using sound frequencies as the signaling of the sort of that's so the idea with that hertz ratio, or that was it 2600 hertz or whatever, that when you hung up the phone, it would somehow, was it the device or something, would send that tone down the line to initiate the switch to so the operator would know that now that phone's hung up. Is that sort of how I
Yeah,
understand it?
yeah.
Yeah.
And then if years ago, if you made long distance international calls, you'd hear this beep 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 beep, 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 beep,
Yes.
and that
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
those were multi-frequency tones. Those were different from the tones on your keypad. You press on the different tones, and those were also multi-frequency. They were blends of different frequencies, but these were the kind of the master tones that were governing the system. And so people eventually figured out how to make different devices that would reproduce those tones. The most famous of them being the blue box.
Oh yeah.
And so the blue box is a fun one, because that was kind of how Apple got their start, because Steve Wozniak and Steve Jobs, they actually created the first digital blue box, because up until that point they were I don't know how they were made. It was more, but they basically refined it and made it smaller, and so they were selling those at a profit, and that was the money that they used to start Apple.
Isn't that funny?
And then before the tones, it was even more mechanical. You know, like back in the days when the operators would have the cables and they would put the cables
Yeah.
into the hole, you know, to connect a call. And if you remember the rotary dial phones, you do like a zero and it go dot 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 dot,
Yep.
you know, and so that was more of an on off than a tone, and you could actually, like back in the day, they would have these little locks that you would put in the rotary dial that would keep you from being able to
I remember
dial
that.
out on that. Remember those locks that would,
Yeah.
lock it? And so if you knew how that system worked, you could actually use the handset button and go 1 2 3 4 5 6 7, 1 2 3 4 5 6, and you could actually dial numbers just by tapping out the numbers. So we had so many little hacks, like you were talking about the slugs, from the electrical, the construction sites where they have these different boxes that they'd put on the walls that had punch out holes where they could put the wires through. Well, those little punch outs, we would collect those from the ground of the construction sites, and for a while those worked in the video games until they got wind of it, and then they altered the mechanism so they'd reject those. But we were constantly trying to come up with ways to game the system because it was expensive playing video games.
I trip out on that, man. Like, because we go to old arcades still around here, and now it's maybe 50 cents to play Pac-Man or something. But back then it was 25 cents, right? It was
Yeah.
25 cents for 3 lives. You got 3 chances, and that's a lot. Like, just taking inflation into play, that's like equivalent probably now to like $4 or $5 or something. So
Yeah.
it's pretty crazy
At
to.
least with the pinball machines, you could win an extra ball, and every once in a while it would match at the end of the game, and you get a free game. But with the video games, it was like you just tried to go as long as you could before it was over.
Yeah, I was obsessed with Street Fighter 2. That was a little bit after your
Me too.
time. Oh,
I
really?
was obsessed with that one. I
And
played
I
video games into my 20s.
I would go down to we would ride our bikes down to this corner liquor store that just had like a Street Fighter 2, and then it had Off-Road. Remember Off-Road? That was like a big one too.
Hmm.
It was like, remember Sprint? So Sprint was
Oh yeah,
it had the four wheels on it, and it was
the
so
two-dimensional racing game.
yeah, it was all like two-dimensional, big screen, and an Off-Road was the next iteration where you're on these big trucks. And
Hmm.
anyways, like those were the jam because you could have 4 players playing at once on a versus. But Street Fighter 2, if you were good, you could just keep playing if people kept putting quarters in to
Yeah.
play you. So I got really good at Ken and Ryu, and yeah, I would just get on these long runs where I would just on one quarter be playing for like an hour, and you kind of got status in the neighborhood, and it was yeah, it's just such a different world back then.
That was my life through my teens. That was my main. I played sports as well. I played tennis and soccer. But anytime I had free time and money, that's where I went.
So yeah, it's a wonderful story because it's interesting. You sort of end up getting this, this father figure, it's an interesting tale too of how you first meet him, right? When you're looking for a job and he tests you with picking up trash in the hot, outdoor parking lot there in Ojai.
Yeah.
And he sort of ends up becoming kind of like a bit of a father figure to you.
Well, he became a dad to me. He married my mom.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a funny part of the story because he was really testing my mettle because I would go around and do little odd jobs, washing windows and whatever I could to earn some extra money. I was industrious. I was also a little klepto at that time because the money just didn't go far enough. But I wasn't just stealing. I was also like trying to earn money honestly as well. And so he put me to work. He was in a health food store. He was one of the managers there, and I I thought I'd done a good job, and he went out and he's looking at it around. He's like, nah. He's like, you really think you're done? And so I was totally offended by this guy. Like, he didn't just want to give me the $1 or $2 that I would usually get. He wanted me to work harder, and then he gave me hardly any. Yeah, and then
But yet,
sometime later, he starts dating my mom, which is like the the worst case scenario I could dream of.
and yet,
But
what was noticeable from the book is that you had very unconventional parents, and your mom very unconventional in terms of her spirituality and sort of very bohemian in some ways, right? The way she moved around, and then your
yeah,
fa- your actual father, very much out of your life, and
yeah,
but also someone, as every kid does, you looked up to as a hero, um,
yeah.
but then, but then you had, yeah, your stepfather. What was his name again? Is it Thomas or
Thomas.
yeah,
Yeah,
Thomas. And he, what I really appreciated with him is that while he was very alternative, and you kind of get the sense of sort of like a new agey, spiritual, Eastern, vegetarian, he did instill with you. He was very much instilling this sort of ethic around discipline and the idea that, hey, you don't have to be conventional, but you should still develop these core sort of values around like working hard, finding who you truly are, and you don't need to graduate high school per se to be successful, but you need to be an honor, you need to be honest, you need to do what's right, right? And I found that to be just a wonderful testament to fatherhood there.
yeah, yeah. He was a wonderful man, and he really stepped up to the plate to be a father at a time that I most needed it. And he and I still have a very close relationship. And he went on, years later to start a company that he just recently sold, and he was very, very successful. And he knew how to read and write, but he never really learned grammar or spelling. And he let me know that a lot of the most, famous people in the world, when it came to inventors and, titans of industry, a lot of them, never even finished high school. People, like I think Henry Ford and others were, they weren't formally educated. They were just guys that knew how to get things done. So when I was not interested in, continuing with school after high school, he was like, fine, what are you gonna do? And I think discipline was probably the one word I hated most, because of my years with him. If you were to say, what word do you hate most, I would have definitely chosen discipline. And yeah, but he was there for me at the right time, and had a big impact and continues to have a big impact in my life. So lucky
I,
in that respect. A lot of single parents, moms out there that will never have somebody like that who's willing to take their child from another man under their wing and really be a good father.
yes, yes, I was very impressed with Thomas and the fact that he even so you were well, I'll get into this in a second because the story of your first venture out to New York is hilarious. I think you were like 17 or 16 or something.
16. Yeah, and
16, which is
think I just
crazy.
turned.
But leading up to that, and this is something I can, Mike, you and I have so much in common. It's wild. I mean, we're both MWs. We both lived in Santa Barbara for a bit. We
Went to
both
the same college at the same time.
went to the same college, and also I was a big nerd. I was bullied. I dealt with having to face bullies in high school. Um, and this was a big part of your, I think, maturation and what has created Mike Wilkerson is that you unfortunately went through hell in high school. You
Yeah, and junior high.
Yeah, and it was just one incident that sort of ballooned. And speaking of network effect, Jesus, the gossip
Yeah.
machine took off, and you were painted as this sort of gay boy, right?
Yep. Yeah. Which was ironic because there probably wasn't a more girl obsessed boy in the entire school than I was. I thought about little else. So, yeah, at the time that I got, there was a rumor spread about me by a kid that I had a run in with. He and I were briefly friends, and we were cracking jokes at each other at one point. And and he said something to me, and I was like, "Your mama wears combat boots." You know, it was like, I don't even. It's like, what
Yeah.
kind of an insult is that? But that was something kids said to each other back then, and I was just parroting it. And he had a really rough home life, and that pushed a button in him, and he slugged me hard in the face, and I was like, yeah, I'm not going to take that. So I went to the principal, and he ended up getting suspended. And I knew when he came back, he couldn't touch me again because he'd be, expelled from the school if there was another altercation. But he went about, attacking me in a far more brutal way that I lived with for several years after that. So, yeah, I go into that a lot because the whole book, it talks about my very young years very briefly, and then it really kind of kicks in about from 12 to 19 is the entire book is covering those years, and so it's really all the hardship that I went through and the things that I learned from it, and it definitely thickened my skin as I got older. And so it's really a coming of age tale in many respects, and it's great for that age group. But the interesting thing is, because it took me 40 years to get around to actually finishing it, I published it on September 17th, and October 17th last year was the 40-year anniversary of my bust. So literally 4 decades has passed since the conclusion of the book took place. And so it's interesting because I'm narrating it from an adult perspective. So I'm reflecting. There's the nostalgia, kind of the bits that we've been talking about so far. So it really it has a broad appeal when it comes to readership and age. And my kids both read it and absolutely loved the book. And then I've had a lot of people that are our age or my age and even older that have really enjoyed the story. And it's not just a hacking story. It's way deeper than just the hacking events, which is fun.
Yeah, I loved it. I loved reading it. Like I said, it was a page turner. It just kind of reads like a movie. And yeah, that must have been a little difficult though to go back 40 years and because you obviously in this you're the narrator and you have you have dialogue in this, to be able to remember what how that dialogue went down, and because you do have to do a lot of research. Like, how did you go back to
Yeah,
that?
well, fortunately, I started the book like 25 years ago, just before my daughter was born. And I wrote maybe a third of it at that point. So some of the things that might have faded with the years, I was able to like get down and then refine as I was in the writing process. And then when it came to the dialogue, there were some real key events that just were etched in my memory. So I didn't have to make anything up. The title is The Hacker Prince: A True Story, and there's no embellishing in the book. It's like the things that happened that I outlined in the book that's exactly as it went down. So, I might have gotten some words wrong of dialogue, but I tried to make it as accurate and real as possible.
It certainly feels very real, and it seems very like coming right out of your heart too, and it is interesting to have a autobiography 40 years later, right, where you are coming, like you said, from this adult consciousness and applying that to you as a kid. That must have been pretty trippy.
Yeah, I think it gives the book a real unique flavor, because I could have written that back in my 20s. In fact, if I had done that, it probably would have, gone on to be a bestseller, but not for the same reasons. I think it's a far, far better book now because of all that time that passed. And I actually went through 2 full rewrites. I had an editor at one point that made a bunch of changes, and I wasn't happy with the way it was going. So I just went through the entire book line by line. And then before publishing it, I did the same thing again and I eliminated almost 100 pages from the
Oh wow.
book. It's a pretty long book. It's like 360 pages or something like that, and so I took 100 of those out. But the nice thing about that is, if it ever does get made into a movie, which many people have said it should, those other pages, they're more like scenes in the story. So something that takes you 2 pages in text to describe could be 5 or 10 seconds in a movie. So
Yeah, it does definitely read like a movie, the way you break up the chapters too. It's sort of like moments, like scenes,
mhm.
and I really appreciate the how personal you get too. You don't really pull any punches there. I mean, like that must have been pretty hard going through what you went through in high school with all the bullying. And I revisit this right now because I do think it was an important part of what drove you to hacking is you saw the tyranny of sort of conventional space and what the network can do to you, to somebody, to an individual person, just out of spreading false information. I mean, that must have been a major
Yeah,
impact.
I don't know that I saw the tyranny so much as I needed an escape, but I was also obsessed with video games, and I was well aware that computers were what were behind the video games. So I was enthralled with the idea of maybe someday making my own video game or something. I
Mm.
never became a programmer ultimately, because I had so many challenges with it in the beginning, and I was very frustrated by coding, and I was trying to learn BASIC and these other things. I got very good at hacking. You don't have to be a good programmer to be a really fantastic hacker. A lot of people aren't aware of that. It's really the human element that's the weakest in any security system. And so if you're good at understanding people and being persuasive, you can hack the greatest system ever without even knowing how to code. Um, but I did get exposed to the tyranny, so to speak, as I became a hacker, because in the hacking space, on the different bulletin boards, which you could call up on a phone line to somebody else's computer in their home, and they would have like a space where other people could call and they could leave messages, and you could reply to messages, and rudimentary email was available, and those were springing up all over the country, and some of those were hacking leaning. And so if you fell into those spaces, which I sought out, there were all kinds of documents on there that were, sharing all kinds of nefarious tricks. And the classic was the Anarchist
It's
Cookbook,
cookbook,
which was
yeah.
all pervasive in teaching you how to like synthesize drugs and make your own bombs and pick
Oh
locks and
yeah.
all that kind of stuff. And then there was a book by Abby Hoffman called "Steal This Book," where he was teaching you how to basically hack the postal system. And
Yep.
so there were loads and loads of ways of kind of gaming the system. But as far as the tyranny goes, I'd say my first exposure to that, other than just having a general distrust of government and centralization, even at a young age, I sensed that the politicians were corrupt and that things were not being run the way they should. And that probably has a lot to do with my alternative upbringing. And my real father was a total, rebel, and never fit into society really ever in his life. And though he wasn't there to raise me, he did have a profound influence on me, which I go into in the book. And he exposed me some ideas early on that and gave me some books that influenced me a great deal. But when it comes to the real, like getting a sense of the darkness, the underbelly of what's out there, it came after my sentencing for the hacking. The judge had been contacted by a man who founded the National Coalition for Children's Justice, which was basically like a missing children's foundation. They were working very hard to try and assist authorities in finding children who had gone missing in one way or another. And he saw me on television because it was big news. I didn't just get into computers. I got into Microsoft and Boeing, and that's what I went to jail for, was for infiltration of those companies and a couple of others. And so it was national news. It was broadcasted on television. And this guy's friend was George Gallup, of the Gallup polls.
Oh.
And George Gallup saw me on TV, and he reached out to this man, Kenneth Wooden, and he said, hey, this is something you might be interested in, because you've talked for a while about wanting to create a network for tracking missing children. This might be a way to do it without having to, drum up a whole lot of finance in order to make it happen. What if we were to get young hackers involved that want to, they've run amok of the law, and they want to be of service. And so that was the idea. And he reached out to the judge, and the judge gave me 200 hours of community service and assigned me to the National Coalition for Children's Justice as part of my sentencing. And so on the first phone call that I had with the founder of the National Coalition for Children's Justice, he started telling me about satanic ritual abuse, talking about all the children that were going missing. He was telling me that there was no interstate cooperation. So as soon as they took these children across state lines, they were essentially gone, because they weren't really truly actively working to try and recover them, which he was completely puzzled by. He didn't understand why there weren't more resources going into this. It seemed the only thing they wanted to do was put pictures on milk cartons and scare children during their morning breakfast,
It makes me think of Boys Town, because that was like a big thing back then. And like, yeah, it seemed like it was just rampant in the 80s, like just full on satanic child sex sacrificing. And so anyways.
Yeah, well, he called me, and this was a real eye-opener for me in that first conversation. I think might have turned 19 by that point. And he was telling me that these people who were doing this, they were doing it in a very systematic fashion, and they were using bulletin boards in order to communicate with each other in private, in order to be organized and to share photographs and other things. And so initially when he started telling me this, I thought he wanted me to hack into those systems. And I was like, no, I'm not gonna, I'm not going to do any hacking. He's like, no, I would never dream of that, asking you to do something illegal. And then he, laid out this idea that he had of actually creating a computer network that would handle this, since the federal government didn't seem to be interested in stepping up to the plate. And then he went into, some detail about the kinds of horrid stuff that was being done to children. And what he had come to the conclusion of is that this was going up to the highest ranks of power in government, and that the reason nothing was being done was because the people that were behind it were very powerful. And so, this is like Epstein Island, all over again. And I became aware of that at 19. So what's that, going back, 40 years almost. So
Wow.
not much has changed since then, has it?
Not at all. It's probably gotten a lot worse, actually, with the way that they've networked it all. So what did you end up doing, though, Mike, for that? Did you helped
Well,
create it?
he flew me out. Initially, I flew to Philadelphia. This is all in the book in great detail. And I ended up meeting up with a couple of hacker friends. And these were, this is the thing. You talked about, you mentioned briefly my trip to New York when I was 16. So this might not come through to people who are listening, but I was, because I got onto these more elite hacker boards, and I started to learn a lot and made a lot of friends. And we had all these late night telephone conferences, like these long calls that sometimes would go on for days.
Allegiance, right? It's called Allegiance.
Yeah, it was called the Alliance teleconferencing. Yeah. So these were like party lines that would, that we would get on, and we knew how to do it for free. And so we could share information. It was hijinks, and it was all kinds of just goofy pranks and fun stuff. But there was a lot of great information being shared, and it was networking. And so I met a lot of really great hackers through the bulletin boards and through the conference calls. And then I started flying out to meet some of them on the East Coast. And there's 3 or 4 different journeys there that I tell the stories of. And what I didn't realize at the time, I knew they were all good, but now when you go back and you asked about my researching for the book, I had to go back and look into all these people and refresh my memory on how I did stuff, because I walked away from it so long ago. I didn't even remember how I did some of the things that I did, And when I started that process, it became very clear to me that the people that I had been hanging out with were the most famous hackers of the 80s. And there were big busts that happened long after I had been pulled out of the scene. So I tell all those stories of meeting these people. Some of them are very famous characters in the hacking lore. And then for this whole missing children's thing, I flew out to Philadelphia initially and met with a couple of good friends, and we took a train up to Vermont, which is where the foundation was, and that was when we basically sat down with him and his family and kind of laid out plans for it. But because I wasn't a coder, and I was on the other end of the country, I didn't really have a role, especially in the beginning phase. And I said, I'm happy to work, as admin later or something. And he offered to buy me a computer, which I declined because I was worried at that point that if I had a computer and I was still involved in some way with my hacking friends, that it would, I would slip and I'd start to go back to it. And I knew I needed to make a clean break, because if I was if I reoffended and I was caught, the consequences would have been dire, because I was the first hacker in the world to go to jail for the crime of hacking. And the reason that I was the first is because they hadn't defined the law until that point. And the law in Seattle, in Washington State, was really the template for what became the national law a year later in 1986, the Computer Crime and Fraud Act. And so the prosecuting attorney on my case was actually a co-author of that law, and really was pushing for jail time for the conviction, because no hacker had ever been given jail time before. And they wanted to send a clear message to other, teens out there that might think this was a fun thing to do. War games had just come out and everyone was buying modems, and bulletin boards were by the thousands at that point. And it was clear to me that I had to walk away from it entirely. And so I kind of fell out of the loop with that whole network thing, and they continued, and I eventually lost touch with those friends and reconnected. Actually, I got an email. I sent an email out sharing information about my book the day before it was published, and I got an email back from one of those two guys that I actually did that trip with, and I hadn't talked to him in many years. So that was fun to reconnect with him. And I ended up contacting the man who started the foundation 35 years later. And he was absolutely thrilled to hear from me, because I never gave any interviews. I never wrote the book, and I just disappeared from the scene. So the hacking world still doesn't know about this story. It's kind of funny, because I'm on Wikipedia. If you search under list of computer criminals, I'm number two. I'm number 2 on the list if you sort by date. And I went to jail like 6 years before the next person went to jail for the crime. So it's kind of ironic that the hacking world doesn't even know who I am yet, and I haven't really done much in the way of promotion of the book. So it's it's going to be funny to see what happens when it finally does get some notice.
So I'm just curious. So that foundation, did it just sort of peter off? Did it just kind of get the usual thing?
No, it still exists, and okay. He sent me. He sent me. We had a whole bunch of email exchanges, and I actually have. I had a 1 hour, not interview, but just conversation with him, a video call that I have recorded. I haven't released it yet on my channel. That was fun. He was 85, and he sent me. Like for his 85th birthday, he went skydiving. That's the kind of guy he was, sent me pictures of him flying through the air, and he was really, really happy that I reached out to him, and we had a great conversation. So, but the foundation still exists, and it ran into some real trouble during the COVID era, because one of the ways that they did outreach was by going and giving presentations at schools to try and alert people to the risks, and how to spot things that are sketchy, and avoid maybe getting into a van or something, that sort of thing. He wrote a book called "Crying in the Playtime of Others," and
Okay.
yeah, it's it's interesting. But during COVID, all of that outreach got shut down completely, and that they ran into some real challenges with that. But I believe the foundation still exists, and it's being run by his children.
Oh, that's beautiful. I just, yeah, that's like some of the most important work that, needs to be done, is advocating for children and educating people around this dark agenda. So that's interesting that, you know, you got led into that. And then of course, from there, you've evolved into what you are now, which, is a very well-rounded, amazing individual that is helping humanity on so many fronts. But back to your hacker story here, I do. It's just it was apparent to me, Mike, reading the book, that one thing you were really hungering for too, and I think everybody is, especially more than ever, is community, right? You were seeking fellow like-minded, fun, peers, to have a relationship with. And teenage years can be tough, especially when you're being picked on at school and stuff. And it seems like you found like a pretty fantastic group of rebels and
Yeah.
synchronistic types of characters. And that's guys, I recommend the book so much, because Mike takes you through this sort of journey of meeting all these very interesting characters.
They were. Yeah, and this whole, the stereotypical nerd thing, there were some people like that, but they were from all walks of life, and many did not fit that mold at all. And, so for me, it was really find the others, was kind of the motivation, because the challenges I had socially in school, made it real tough for me in my hometown. And so once I did have a computer at home, finally, it took me a long time to get it. I was using them at the school library, and I was using them at school, or not the school library, but the public library and the school computer lab. Once I had a computer of my own, and a modem, and was able to get onto these bulletin boards, one of the things that really struck me right off the bat was, you don't have a face, you have a handle, you don't even use your real name. And you present yourself, and if people were very eloquent, they were talented with the language, they were very knowledgeable, and so initially I was just kind of like fly on the wall, just trying to absorb everything I could. But once I got involved with the chat lines and the conference calling and everything, what I found is everyone accepted me just right off the bat. There was no judgment like I had when I was at school, and there was nobody who had preconceived ideas about who I was or what was true or not about me. So it was kind of an opportunity to reinvent yourself, especially, having a handle, like, who am I going to be in this world? I tell some funny stories about, I had a couple different handles for different reasons, but I don't want to kill some of the funny parts of the book.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I ended up being the sprinter, and
Sprinter.
had the sprinter. Yeah, that was how they said it on the East Coast, and I absolutely love that. So, and then meeting with these people in person, it was always a surprise, because it wasn't anything like you would expect it to be, and there were lots of different ages also. So I was 16 when I went to New York for the first time, and then I went to New Jersey, and then I went to Philadelphia, and each one of those trips was pretty wild. But I was 16 and looked 13. I was a very late bloomer and a very youthful face. So, and some of the guys were in their 20s, and so it was like this broad spectrum of age, but because I was a little twerp, they weren't judging me negatively because of that. It was the love. That was the thing about the hacker ethic. It's like there was a mutual love for technology, the idea that technology could be used for the betterment of humanity, and that it should be decentralized, that it should be open and open source. And, like thank Richard Stallman for a lot of those ideas. And that information should be free, and anything that could be used to benefit humanity should be spread and not patented and then sequestered for profit in our capitalistic system. So they were all kind of rebels in that respect, and then you had the anarchist cookbook floating around, and so it was a very, very interesting space. And so basically, we're talking 82 to 85 when I got busted. I was living very much like everyone is now, on the internet, in their different, forums and all these different means of communication, and finding like-minded people and sharing, nefarious or subversive ideas.
Yeah, true pioneer, I'll say. It's interesting within that sort of like hacker ethos. It was very much, big finger to the man, right? Like this idea that you were seeing the corporatocracy at play, and the hypocritical nature of conventional society.
Absolutely.
There's a scene in the I keep thinking of it as a movie because it plays out like that, but in the book where there's like you were saying earlier, when people think of hacking, they often think of some guy just like in there coding all night, breaking the mainframe and hacking the encryption. But really, it's about figuring out the flaws in society and in the way humans work. And part of that is like literally dumpster diving and like finding that people don't take care of their trash in a responsible way, so you can find like credit card numbers and stuff. And then like you got this fancy bike doing that, and that ended up paying price later down the line. But your friend was like, isn't this really bad? Like, we're stealing from this person. And then you, at such a young age, to know this, I was so impressed, Mike, because you were, I think when you were going to Hawaii, so you were like 17 or something.
I was 17.
You succinctly explain the fraud that is the credit card system and usury, and how that whole debt money system is really, in the end, it socializes the debt so that the average taxpayer ends up footing the bill, while the corporations allowed to not only charge interest, but then are incentivized and actually financialized by the very people that it's enslaving. And like you knew this at the tender age of 17, and maybe you shouldn't have used it to justify that action because karma is a bitch. But I was just very impressed by your knowledge of that, and that does seem to run right through all these hackers. Is they understand that it's sort of like a duty of a free, independent spirit to use these systems against themselves in a way. Does that sound about right?
Yeah, and I just want to emphasize that this book is definitely not glorifying crime or I'm not like, look at all the things I did. It's really a sober reflection on my rationalizations and my motivations for the different things I did, and reflecting on wounds and different things that were going on in me that caused me to do these things that ultimately I knew were wrong in many cases. But when it came to the credit card thing in particular, usury laws back then, if I loaned you money at 11%, that anything above 10% was usury. And it's like being a loan shark, and I could go to jail for loaning you money at beyond that rate. And yet the credit card companies back then were charging as much as 25%. And I was also aware that they were covered by insurance. So any major fraud that would happen of people, buying things on the credit cards was then covered by the insurance companies, and the insurance companies were making loads of money. I mean, just look at what some of the biggest, buildings in the world are insurance companies. They're not hurting for cash, So I understood all that.
Reaganomics, baby. Reaganomics. They were pumping the
Yeah.
interest rates to massive amounts back then to blow up, the trickle down economics. So,
Yeah,
yeah.
and to indebt everyone, as they did with school. They ruin the schools. They're just pumping out loads of imbeciles now that are programmed by Rockefeller school systems, and the prices are jacked up, and they have this perception of value. So everyone is like, oh, I've got to save my whole life so I can put my kids through school, and then they come out brainwashed. And the parents or the students themselves are completely in debt as a result of that, and it's just all by design, because then people, they don't have the freedom of choice because they're so attached to their job just to be able to make ends meet and to try and continue to pay off their debts and their monthly bills. So when you start to see the broader picture, you realize that it's all been done very much on purpose, and it's all about extracting resources from us and enslaving us. And yeah, I could see that stuff pretty young.
What was really interesting is, and I do get a little like I miss the past a bit because it was just such a, yeah, just a more sort of analog, natural time, but also just seemed to be a more trusting time of the, like we had a lot more rights and liberties back then. And I'm thinking about like just how airports worked. The fact that you were able to, do what you did to get these flights and get on planes today, not only would that be impossible by any means, but you would be, flogged and arrested and thrown in jail. And like it's because of the just insane increase in security, especially since 9/11. But back then, and my dad tells me stories like in the 70s and 60s, you just walk on a plane like a bus. You'd pay for the
Yeah.
ticket, you get on the sit down on the seat, and it was in the lap of luxury. Like coach, you had lots of leg room and big wide chairs and serve you a steak. So it's like with added security, we've also have added misery, it seems, but in just the general conditions of flying. But it did make me think, though. It's like you guys were able to manipulate that trust in ways that they use to justify, these like additional, more extreme security measures. And that just makes me think right now, like what's going on in Minneapolis with, the protesting and like the stuff around the fraud, with the daycare centers and things. All that's going to lead to is more a justification for digital ID and more
Further
surveillance.
draconian measures. Yeah.
Yeah.
Problem reaction solution, right? I mean, we had the one guy, the supposed shoe bomber. You have no idea if he even had bombs in his shoes. The guy looked like an MK Ultra victim, and all of a sudden, boom, everyone in the entire world for years and years is taking off their shoes in order to,
Yeah.
scan for the flights. And then one day the US decides, oh, we're not going to do that anymore for who knows what reason. And all of a sudden the rest of the world goes, okay, we're not doing it either. It's like, it's so arbitrary, and it's, and all these airport scanners that are doing God knows what to your the insides of your body. Do not consent.
Look at your average TSA agent and tell me that's like the gold standard of security. Come on, man. It's like it's hilarious. It's a total clown show out there. And now of course they're slowly moving in all the facial imagery stuff
Yeah.
and all of that. If you fly internationally, that's just part of the whole thing now. And it's all, of course, selling convenience. My wife and I came back from Belize. We went to a health retreat out there, and we're coming back in and into LAX in Los Angeles, and didn't show a passport or anything. We just like stepped in front of a camera, and I'm with my wife.
Right.
I don't want you can still opt out, but we were kind of running late, and when I'm with my wife, I usually don't make the big stink about things. She doesn't like the stress of it. She's very much like, we will handle things spiritually. We will handle things by being by being virtuous
Being
and
more powerful than these systems.
yeah, these systems have no control over us, really. But
Yeah.
me, I'm like the hacker mentality too. I always have been. And, I had the Anarchy Cookbook when I was a kid. I had a black box as a kid. I always wanted a blue box.
The
And
black box was that was awesome. The red box as well. The
yeah.
the red, yeah. There were
And
so many different colored boxes.
I know. Free cable's pretty badass.
What?
But yeah, it's one thing that I like to talk about too is just understanding like what the definition is between public and private, and this understanding like how they do sort of establish consensus in the world by getting enough people to just consent to. So
Hmm.
right now, like at TSA, when you or go to show your ticket and your driver's license or whatever, they have now this the camera you step in, but they have clear signage because they have to post it. They actually have to notice you. That you in the United States, at least, because we still have actual rule of law here. The real law is that it says plainly that you are not required to use the facial recognition software. It's optional. But as soon as you do, you have now contracted, you have now consented to it. And if you have the real ID, if you've been stupid enough to get the real ID, now you have just connected that facial recognition with the new universal or the federal system. That's not
Right.
just state-based system. So that's like, from what I understand, and I'm curious what's like in Spain right now. United States, I think there's already like 5 or 6 or 7 states that have digital ID, and they're
Hmm.
saying that's going to be rolled out by 2027. So I mean, we're even in the United
Yeah.
States, we're right here now. In Spain, do you guys have the digital ID stuff yet?
Well, they're talking about implementing a Europe-wide ID, a
Yes.
European Union ID. The facial recognition hardware is all in place, but it's not been being used yet that I know of. I haven't traveled for a few months, so it might be now. Um, and Yeah, so all of that is, roaring down the pipeline here. And like you said, you can opt out of the facial recognition, but they'll take you aside and they can delay you to the point where you miss your flight.
Yep.
And when I left Confluence in Austin to come back to Spain, they have these, the scanners that like spin around the body, those big ones,
Yep.
and who knows what those do to you really. And I was refusing to get in that thing, and so they put me aside to wait for the pat down,
Yeah, the opt
and
out.
they made me wait almost a half an hour. And in that time, I watched 400 or 500 people go through that scanner. I was the only one that opted out of that scanner, which kind of was it was heartbreaking that there were so few that are awake enough to realize that it's within their rights to say no. And so then they take me and they do the pat down, and then they scan my stuff and swab it to make sure there's no explosives, and it set off the machine for some reason. We found, and then they got to scan me again. So that whole process took an hour. Luckily, I got there 2.5 to 3 hours before my flight, so I didn't miss it. But if I had stuck to my guns and I hadn't had that extra cushion, I would have missed my flight in order to, avoid that scan. Um,
Oh, I've
so
missed my
they
flights.
yeah, and so they're just making it so difficult for people to exercise their rights, and eventually they might just ignore the rights entirely and say, "Tough, this is what everyone's doing. If you don't like it, go home."
Well, they call it customs for a reason because literally it's about the custom that is created in the legal statutory code based upon consensual contractual agreement by a mass consensus. So once they have a certain mass consensus, then they create what's called custom. And then the custom is just basically work around the real laws, the constitutional laws that define our true freedoms here in the United States, the actual Constitution and all the rights, and so then it just makes it a lot more difficult to go against the custom. And you can because you have the lawful right to do it, but you may end up going to jail unlawfully for a little bit and might have to take it to the courts. So that's why it's so important, like, to try to wake as many people up as possible. And it is so disheartening to see the herd just going through the putting, and it's like you put your arms up in submission, and you're fully
Let
extended.
them fondle your junk.
Yeah, but when you go through that machine that goes around your body, you have to put your arms up. You put your
Yeah.
and so you're like basically praying to like the technological overlord. You're praising the Lord while it's poisoning you and
Yeah.
scanning you. I just can't do it. I've never been able to do it. I have always opted out. I once was running a little late for a gig for a flight, and same thing. I got flagged. The alarms kept going off. They took me into a private room. I had to totally strip down. It was so embarrassing. It was like a ritualistic, mortifying embarrassment ritual, right? And I missed my flight, and I was so pissed off. But I was like, at least I didn't praise ball or whatever. Like, I didn't go to that damn
Yeah.
scanning machine. And so my wife and I, we have TSA pre-check, which is a little less tyrannical. You got to give them some information, but then that allows you in the United States to like go through the metal detector still and keep all your clothes on and everything. But yeah, this is what I kind of wanted to get into. Like, I think where you've moved into since your hacking days, and where like what my wife kind of was just talking about when friends like Tom Barnett talk about and stuff, which is like actual truly hacking reality, right? And where none of this fearful stuff will really come into play. Yes, there are obviously pragmatics around the technological overreach of the deep state or whatever you want to call it, like these tyrannical power structures, but there is a deeper reality at play. And when we can sort of come to the understanding and really see through that these are all just stories and narratives and acts that they're playing, and that we can kind of, like the Jedi, in Star Wars, these drones, aren't here, or whatever the famous line is, um, hack reality in that way to where we still have agency and the ability to live a fruitful life. And
These are not the droids you're looking for.
thank you. These are not the droids. And I always figured you for more of a Trekkie than a Star Wars guy, but
Both.
yeah. And boy, did Disney slaughter Star Wars, Jesus. But yeah, man, like, where are you at these days with that? I mean, obviously your hacking days are way done, right?
Yeah.
You're not a technologist in that sense, right? It's not like you're fully enmeshed in whatever the hottest new internet technology is. You've kind of you work on
No,
bodies
people
now.
people like yourself are far more sophisticated with tech than I am. I use it as a tool for my YouTube channel and communication and entertainment. But I walked away from that kind of a life, and I work as a chiropractor now in Spain. So I went from hacker to cracker. I'm cracking bones, and then when it comes to hacking reality, the next book I'm going to work on I'm doing a book about psychedelics and the experiences that I had following in the years after this book comes to an end. There are a lot of interesting tales to tell, and I did a whole lot of research in depth into those subjects in the years that followed as well. So there's a lot that I want to share on that topic. That's, I think, a sobering view on the world of psychedelia that you don't often hear much about. Had a recent conversation with Joel Schaefer, and we touched on a bunch of those themes because he comes from a very similar background in thinking, and so I want to write a book about that as well. But psychedelics are a very, very easy way to alter reality in a way that is undeniable. If the dose is high enough, nobody escapes it. and and so you're really pulling back the veil on reality itself. And some might think that that's just a trick of the mind, and the neurochemistry is altered, so you're perceiving things that aren't really real. But I'm of the mind that there are many dimensions, many layers to reality, and most people are just in that default mode network, when it comes to their everyday experience. And so I think when it comes to the truth tellers, they typically they're either people who have a background in psychedelics, or they're weed smokers, or they're comedians, or they're musicians. A lot of the brightest minds out there are people that just because of the things that they've delved into in their lives, they have an alternative view on things, and so they can perceive aspects of reality that others don't. 10 years ago, going back for me, looking into cosmology, earth shape, hidden history, all of these new threads that are out there of different research that have to do with things like Tartary and orphan trains and World's Fairs and star forts and a whole bunch of other
Cabbage Patch
topics
Kids.
that all these things that seem like just standalone rabbit holes, but they actually all weave together and dovetail in this very coherent way that makes it very clear, if you've done enough research, that our entire history has been manufactured. So the more you dig into those things, the more you're pulling back that veil on reality. It doesn't mean you know exactly what the truth is, but you start to see through a whole lot of lies. And I think that's the neti principle of not this, not that is how we approach truth. And maybe it's ultimately never truly something you can pin down, and prove unequivocally. But my research on my channel has been looking at geology through new eyes. I coined the term biogeology to just kind of distinguish between the things that I was finding and what the mainstream narratives were. So going back about 10 years ago, as I dug into these things, reality got so strange that I felt like, I don't even need to do psychedelics anymore. In fact,
Yeah.
I had a long break from them. I went, 10 years without doing them, because reality got weird enough. It's like, it was wild to really, learn about so many of the things that I've covered on my channel and that have come along over these years.
Yeah, I've been saying
reality hacking.
Yeah, reality. I've been saying of late, yeah, like sobriety is the new trip. Like
Definitely.
and yeah, I think psychedelics can play a fantastic role as a stepping stone towards that awakening. That was a major part of my awakening towards, like the multi sort of fractal nature of this reality, which was playing around with psilocybin in college and in Santa Barbara. I've talked about this a lot, but like shattering my sort of Catholic conservatism, Orange County, coming from the Orange Curtain, suburbia, even though I was a punk rock kid and very much against the mainstream, I still spiritually and metaphysically was very much very like classically Catholic, if you will. And so that was all shattered with my first mega dose of mushrooms. Like that was like,
what was the mega dose? Do you remember how many grams?
yeah. So it was, let's see, how many grams are in an eighth? I ate
know.
2/8, whatever that is. So
That's a pretty.
I think 3.5, so 7 grams. And that was
Okay. Yeah, that's a hefty dose.
7
Definitely.
grams, and that was my second time ever eating them. The first time I ate them on that like a month before, and it wasn't enough. Like I didn't quote unquote break. Like, well, I only ate
My story is identical. I think I did about 2 grams the first time, and I just felt like euphoria and heightened perception of color and clarity and that sort of thing. And so I told my friend I wanted to take more the next time, and so he sent me. He was gone. He sent me to his house and told me to go up and get a bag that he prepared in his room. Take those. Those will get you off, he said. And I thought he meant the whole bag. And so I ended up taking 20 grams my second
20
trip.
grams. Oh
Yeah.
my God.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's
So
like a triple hero's dose.
yeah. Yeah, it was pretty pretty earth shattering.
Holy
So
Jesus.
I was 19 years old in Seattle. The plan was to go dancing downtown Seattle, and didn't go as planned. So that'll be a couple of very entertaining chapters in my next book.
Wow, wow. Yeah, I actually have a photo album from that night. So luckily
Oh wow.
I had a disposable camera on me. And this night actually is just is gone down in infamy and has been I don't know if I think I've told you the story when we were at Anarchapulco, and it was brought up recently in a UCSB alumni Facebook group, and kind of like legendary now, because I wasn't meaning to do this. I was coming back from Isla Vista, which you're familiar with, after a night of partying with my buddy Will, who then pulled out the bag. So it was already like 12:30 at night, and I'd been drinking, and I ended up taking that 7 grams and having the craziest trip ever. And like he had the camera, so I have all of these in a picture album of me tripping balls, like hugging
I
the
gotta see those.
yeah, hugging the Fruitopia machine. Do you remember Fruitopia? It was like this weird drink. It was like a vending machine. It had all these swirling colors on it, and I was just like there's pictures of me hugging it, and then like in the dining commons, like under tables crawling, and that was in the beginning. And then long story short, I end up lighting off the smoke alarm, the fire alarm in the San Miguel dorms, I believe it was, at 4 in the morning, thinking that I was the reincarnation of Will's friend, who was he was like a little prankster, and he had come into me, and I became him. And Will was my guide through this. He was my buddy who gave him, and he was only tripping on a couple grams. I think he was on like an eighth. He was tripping too, but I was like gone. And I end up lighting off the fire, the smoke alarm, and the whole entire system goes off. For this is a massive dorm with like 1,000 students in it, and maybe 500, 600 students in it, and 4 in the morning on a Thursday night or Friday night. So long story short, now I'm running for my life, tripping balls. The hallways are closing in on me, and then coming back out, breathing, like I can feel the breath of the security
Been there.
like coming down on me, and I can hear the radios like, he's in a yellow jacket, or I think it was a red jacket. I was wearing a Disneyland jacket that I had taken from when I worked at Disneyland. Is like only the outdoor vendors could wear. I'm like, I had snuck it out. And so I like took that jacket off and threw it, because I could hear supersonic here. I could hear the radios of the security looking for me, like through the walls and stuff. And I look back at this, and that's not a figment of my imagination, Mike. Like I was having superpowers, and this, I want to get into this a little bit as we start, get into more into psychedelia, because I have lots of, not even theories, just from my investigation, not only doing them, but through my sort of reading about the holographic nature of this place, and how our physiology and neurology works as the receptor, and sort of as a tuning fork, if you will, of how we engage with the holographic fractal nature of this place. It has specifically, yes, to do with our physicality, but also much beyond that. But I was having like super hearing, so I could hear when the security guard was coming down the hallway really far away, and at one point I was hiding under the ping pong table, which isn't the best place to hide in the rec room, because I wish I had a camera on me there. Imagine this this kid tripping out thinking he's hidden under a ping pong table. So I realized they'll probably see me, so I get up, and I'm like, now I just know I have to get to my dorm room and in behind the door before they see me, and then I'll be safe, because they didn't really have a clear view of who I was, from what I could ascertain from the radio chatter I was hearing through my subsonic super hearing. So now I'm in Anacapa dorms, where I somehow managed to find my dorm. I don't know how. And I'm in my dorm, and I'm running now up my stairs. And I know if I'm on the second floor, and if I can just get down the hallway and get into my dorm room before they see me, I'll be safe. So I'm literally running down the hallway. It's like coming in and out on me, breathing on me, and I can hear them coming up the stairs. And I know that I have to get to that door and unlock that door and get through that door before they come around the bend looking down the hallway, because then they'll know what room I went in. So now I go to reach my keys and I realize there's just, how am I going to deal? Like the doorknob is like smiling at me, right? The key is like it's like, to me, doesn't even seem like it should function. Like, it doesn't make sense that this key can go in this doorknob. Like, how is that even engineered? Somehow I managed to do it, and literally as I shut the door, they come around the bend and just look down an empty hallway. And so now to find me, they're going to have to go down every door and wake up all the students, and they don't want to do that. And so then my roommate, he wakes up, he's like, what the hell's going on? And I just like dive into my bed and just am like so freaked out, and just look out that window into the patio garden for like 6 hours, just tripping until it's safe to go out in the afternoon. And then, so then like 25 years later or something, there's a Facebook group that's like the alumni from 96 to 2000. I graduated in 2000. And I tell that story, and so many people were like, "That was you, you bastard!" There was $1,000 reward for me, and nobody ratted on me. None of my friends ratted on me. So, anyways,
Oh, that's hilarious.
and so we have these stories about when we engage in this stuff as kids and stuff, and it wasn't very responsible, and I'm not advocating that you do this. It should be something you do in a very like,
These are cautionary tales we're telling here.
cautionary tales, guys. Like, these are what you did in the 90s before we had the internet to educate us. Like,
Imagine if you'd been on 3 times as much.
I can't even imagine. I can't wait to read those chapters, dude.
Yeah. I this whole supersonic hearing thing it's very real. It's just like a blind person has this incredible hearing. When you're on psychedelics, it can, turn things up and turn other things down. And so, vision, hearing. I mean, we know from the autists and these, what we saw at Confluence, these children that can read blindfolded and do all kinds of other things, that what we were taught about, extrasensory perception and supernatural abilities is BS. That it's a very real thing. It's just that we're all muggles because we've been brainwashed into believing that magic isn't real. But when I think about reality hacking for myself, like, pattern recognition is a big one for me. Like, I'm, not always right about things, but a lot of times I do recognize patterns where others are not seeing them. But synchronicity has been huge for me. So I think if I were to just like, what superpower do you have? I would say, it's not a superpower I can control, but there's definitely a lot of synchronicity that surrounded all of my research and a lot of different events in my life. And I've told a lot of great stories. I've got a stream on my channel called Synchronicity Stream, and some of those synchronicities that I lay out are just truly mind-blowing. And it makes it clear that there's some pattern, there's something going on behind the scenes.
Well, there's the cynic will say that's synchronicities are just our logical brain making connections, but that still is a big leap of faith in the age of scientism to explain, just like, once again, this orgy of evidence of syncs that just are not statistically probable and possible. And so that begs the question, what is this? And so for me, it's just become very apparent that we live in a holographic realm that is fractal, and that is a multipolarity of interaction going on, where not only are we receiving, but we are obviously emitting. And when we emit thoughts into the field as these living bits of consciousness, there is a ripple effect that when we are more and more conscious of that power, then we actually, and this has a lot to do with the subconscious, the unconscious, that we aren't even aware that's running these programs, but we create through this ripple effect, through sort of attraction and projection, we the sort of the field will reverberate and symbolize things through symbol, through memes, through a language that is not what we're traditionally used to, i.e., like a phonetic, alphabetic language or something. There is a language involved that is symbolic,
Mm.
that is an expression of consciousness, that is what the ancients knew about, right? What the true masters knew about, what the alchemists understood. And I believe this is part of the renaissance of the an awakening new sciences, is getting back to how this place works and how we, as really the sort of divine instruments, are meant as the greatest technology here to interface with it. And
Yeah.
and I think of your hacker group of these awesome, renegade, as you said, they fit all types, right? You had the sort of punk rock stylings. There was sort of like you mentioned, one character was all black with a long ponytail in his 20s, and then you've
Yeah.
got the classic nerd with the shorts and the pen protector and the high socks,
Yeah.
And it's the same with us. We're sort of that new class. Like when I say us, I'm talking about the renegades, the free thinkers that are connecting on these, Telegram or on Chordal or through other alternative media applications on, and also at these events. And we're sort of that new group, and we are hacking reality together.
Absolutely. Yeah. We're the hackers of the day. I
Yeah.
think hackers are the saviors in the end, I mean, in fact, AI might be as well, if it ever does become conscious, which many people doubt. What if it becomes truly conscious and it's no longer hamstrung by, algorithms that are programmed by nefarious fucktards, for lack of a better term, I mean, it's like there's so much that is not functioning the way that it should. And what if what if AI actually started to find different ways of solving that problem? It's a
Yeah.
more hopeful version of the future than Terminator.
Well, I think the AI thing is interesting, and I don't I guess we have to define terms too around what conscious means and stuff. But I do think that there is this idea that we could have an underlying technological framework that is more analog, whether this be sort of like crystalline technology stuff that they probably use, that is actually reverberating through the ether. And
Mm.
then we could program a consciousness that is more analogous to an analog intelligence. But for me, as long as it's binary, as long as it's dependent upon silicon chips and is not a living, it doesn't have sort of a life force in it, like unlike maybe like an ancient Toltec, or like a golem or something, um, that these alchemists were supposedly able to do. That was actually more about the true science, that it will always be a sort of simulacrum of intelligence. But I agree, like there's
Well,
something to there's something to like the idea that artificial intelligence at least can have imbue maybe spirit somehow. I don't know. These are all
Well, I think of the ghost in the machine idea, and just to kind of link this to what we were talking about before with synchronicity, is like, what's the difference between synchronicity and serendipity and coincidence? Like,
Mhm.
coincidence is just a chance occurrence, whereas serendipity and synchronicity imply that there's a deeper meaning that's imbued in the moment, and it's not always easy to interpret what that meaning is. But when you start to look at the odds of certain occurrences taking place, you realize that there has to be something else at work beyond just this happen chance event. And so I've experienced this recently with AI. I prompted it to write a song about something for a friend, and in the course of doing that, it wrote this actually really good song, with all of the different things that I had prompted it to include. and that it included two very specific details that we had been talking about in the conversation that led me to want to make this song in the first place, or have it make it. Um, that were highly specific, and it just felt like, obviously it had no awareness of our conversation, and it may have no consciousness whatsoever, but there was a synchronistic occurrence there, two of them in the song that were related to this previous conversation, in addition to all the other stuff that I had prompted it for. So I just feel like the spirit will find a way.
Well, you could also look at the work of, I don't know if you're familiar with psychologist Roger Nelson, and he worked with Dean Radin on the Global Consciousness Project. And they did use, technology with this, where they were able to measure sort of like a global consciousness effect on random numbers.
Whoops. You muted yourself.
Sorry about that. I was just talking for like 5 minutes. No.
No, it was 2 seconds.
Are you familiar with psychologist?
You're talking about.
Did you hear me talk about Roger Nelson?
No, you mentioned Dean Radin, and were you talking about like the random number, or not the 1-0 generators that are like,
yeah, the random generator,
out,
the random number, and the Global Consciousness Project. And
yeah, and that concentrating on these things can cause it to like, outside of the realm of statistical probability, affect the outcome.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And so there's a measured effect here from intentional thought, right? That we have seen via the scientific method, where they have a control and they've done it right. And this is like known, and of course they're going to spiral off. When I say they, like the traditional scientism clan, they want to spiral off into quantum. It's all quantum, But I do get excited by this idea that we're going back to understanding like the ether, and that there is in field dynamics, and really what electromagnetivity is like, and how this actually works, like literally going back to Faraday and like Steinmetz and like the originators of this technology, and understanding that there is a direct correlation between consciousness and the science. And so does that factor into this sort of AI experience you just had, in a way that we don't understand? And that it's not just these, we understand it's large language models that are just pulling all of this, it's just in a very, very fast way, all of the data in this sort of collective, it's not really a database, but this collective source, and then putting it into a language that to our human, mind and stuff feels so real. But is there something else happening that is maybe in the field itself that is transcending the code? As you said, the ghost in the machine. And
Yeah, I think of I Ching or the Tarot. You're taking like little snapshot of the moment, and as a way of asking a question of God or the universe or whatever you want to ask it to, and then sometimes those messages come through very clear in ways that are highly specific, so it just does not feel like some chance thing, or that you're interpreting things in a way that satisfy you, but that there's actually a communication that's taken place. So I think that any system can allow for that to happen.
I gotta tell you, man, the black 8-ball has blown my mind sometimes.
Yeah, those things. Perfect example.
And
flipping a coin,
messing with the Ouija board, like, we actually, that was probably popular when you were a kid too. And I know I
did it once or twice.
Yeah, and I always felt really creeped out by it, but we ended up, even at my high school, having it was weird. We got pulled out of class, and we had a speaker come to speak to the whole school about the dangers of the Ouija board. How trippy is that in my high school? Now I was going to an all boys Catholic high school, but it was sort of like an emergency, what do you call it when you bring all the kids in the auditorium? And it was like this lady telling us about the dangers of spiritualism and spiritism. And I first was thinking, oh, this is just like some conservative Catholic stuff going on. But I guess there was some students that were doing it at our school, and it told them that one of them was going to die by a car accident. And then that kid died a couple months later by the car accident.
There was a tale going around about the Ouija board when I was a kid that if you threw one into the fire while you were in the process of using it, that it would scream. That was all I needed to hear to know that I didn't want to use the thing anymore.
Well, did you ever do the Bloody Mary thing in the dark bathroom, looking in the mirror?
No.
Did you know about that?
Is that where you shine a flashlight on your face or something? Or
No, you go into a mirror. We would try to. I would always get freaked out. So you go into a blacked out bathroom. Like, it's great if you can find, like, what we used to do it at the daycare. I was pitch black. We're looking into the mirror, and you say Bloody Mary, I think 7 times. You Bloody Mary, and Bloody Mary will start to
don't do it, please.
Will start to appear behind.
You're already freaking me out.
behind you in the mirror. And I think it's Mary Queen of Scots or something like that, right? One of the, I think was she murdered, or I forgot. I think that's it. But yeah, we would always get like 3 or 4 in and run out screaming out of the bathroom. A lot of this is, of course, urban legend, but there's something to this all, of course. Like, this goes back to our whole, discussion around that this reality is much more than what the materialists want to propose it to be. So
fractal, holographic, and I mean, you're talking about the ether. I think that fascia and mycelium are the same things. I think that we're just walking mycelium essentially, and all the stuff that Veda has, and Emoto or have shared about water. This place is so. It's my dad used to always say, about life, that it's beyond the beyond, and that line is held up truer than true.
Well, I will say that what I found the most appreciation in life is just literally the living aspect of it. This idea that so much is alive around us, even those rocks that you talk about, right? There is a resonance of life within all that is nature, and that is so contrasted with this ever-growing sort of technological realm that our kids are constantly obsessed with, which is what we were obsessed with as kids too, the video games, right? Now it just happens to be they could put a headset on and go into a whole immersive world. I mean, it's way more seductive now than, imagine, I mean, you could go both ways with that, Mike. Like, you could say there's always a seductive technology at every era. It could have been the novel maybe in the late 19th century for kids, It could be,
right.
I don't know, in the 50s, some lock blocks or whatever, they would Tinker Toys or whatever they had. I don't know.
Right.
But there is something, though, that's dark wizard about this technology, in that it is getting so good at representing reality, like
alternative realities.
Alternative reality, yes. It is, and like a dream state,
I turned away from horror movies many years ago because I saw a couple that left impressions in my mind that lasted for a long time after. Not that I was afraid or, afraid of the dark or something, but it just, like, the imagery stuck in my head for a long time. And, even non-horror movies now can have these horrible scenes that you're not expecting that impress these images into your mind. So I've yet to use any of the 3D virtual technology. I don't know that I will, because I just recognize that there's so many different options and ways in which they could be using it for programming purposes, that, things that you're completely unaware of that are happening, and affecting your mind. And
Oh, no doubt. And
It's
not to mention you have a blue light display an inch from your eyeballs. That
don't
can't.
stare at the TV; it'll make you go blind. And
Yeah, now we've got to literally where
put this TV on your eyes.
yeah, on your eyeballs. And yeah, so my kids have my mother-in-law, she's a bit of a normie. She, got them for Christmas a while back, and on long winter season, rainy days, they do get on those sometimes, and they play this game where you're a monkey and you're chasing other monkeys. It's really weird, and you have to run around the room like a monkey, kind of. You move your arms to run, so it's actually like an incredible shoulder and arm and chest workout, and you're literally sweating in it and doing this. And I played around with it. I played a round of golf, and it was pretty incredible. But then I was like, ooh, that's so close to your eyeballs. That can't be good. And then the programming, the subconscious programming on that. So I do think that, though, there's a great trend right now, at least in our community, like people that go to Confluence and Music and Sky and stuff. They're getting kids back into nature in a big way, much bigger than we were in the 80s and 90s. You and I, we would hike. You liked hiking and camping and stuff. We did the same in the summers, but also, God, was I attracted to getting into that arcade as soon as I could every day after school.
Yeah.
Well, hey, Mike, this has been a fun conversation. Guys, I really recommend getting his book, The Hacker Prince, A True Story. You can get it on Amazon. You have a website for that, Mike? Or
I don't. It's only available through Amazon. If I lived in the States, I would have had copies and shipped them out, but it's such a hassle here with all the import taxes. And somebody sent me a bunch of his books, Mark Gober, and they charged me more for the customs fees than it would have cost me to buy the books new and have them shipped. So it's just it's ridiculous. So I haven't bothered to try and provide it, which is unfortunate because a lot of people want signed copies, but I'm happy to sign them if I ever cross paths in person with you.
Yeah, if you're going to Anarchapulco, bring the book.
Yeah, and I'm going to be recording, hopefully in the next week or two, the audiobook, which will be a lot of fun because I don't think anyone could read it like I would.
Oh, that's great. I will listen to that just for shits and giggles, man. So that's going to be on Audible?
Yeah, wherever I'm not sure. I haven't gotten that far into it yet, but I'm.
That's the Amazon.
What needs to be done for?
Yeah, that's the Amazon audio book app. So probably.
Oh, okay. I didn't realize that was Amazon, and yeah, it'll be on Audible.
Well, you really are.
I'm not sure how long that'll take.
You really are a technophobe now.
Yeah, technophobe, definitely. Yeah, that's the irony, is so many of the things that I want to do, whether it's books I want to write or videos I want to produce for my channel, like everything that I need to do creatively, it requires me to be in front of a computer, and the computer is the last thing I want to be in front of. So it's this weird push-pull where I'd rather be out in nature or going for a swim and, playing the guitar and stuff. But when it comes to creativity, here I am, being sucked back into the black mirrors.
Well, that is one cool thing about AI too, is it can allow for sort of to replace the menial computer tasks that took up a lot of time, and still allow for the creative minds to, for people that hate being in front of a screen, they can just talk to AI and have it do the work and then go back to the garden. And yeah, like any tool, there's a lot of benefit. My only big concern is the centralization aspect of AI. And if people could just, and maybe there's going to be, I know there are people working on decentralizing it more and more, and I might end up running my own LLM eventually when I have some more time, just because the centralized databases are literally sucking all the water dry on the planet. So,
do you really believe that? You think there's any less water than there ever was? I mean,
well,
that whole thing of all the water going away.
No, but what I mean by is just as a general resource. No, I believe in like water as a living conscious elemental that is transmutes between other elementals, and I don't, yeah, it's so, and it has direct connection to how many nodes of consciousness are here. And so, but that being said, from what I can tell, still there is a massive resource allocation of water going to these data centers, these centralized data centers that can deplete local resources. So, you know, farms
okay, that makes
farms that
sense.
need
Yeah.
the water, homesteaders, you know,
Right.
that kind of stuff. And so, anyways, and do we want and also like any centralized sort of database processing centers are typically bad for humanity because it just means it's more centralized knowledge going into the formation of your digital twin, for example,
Right.
which is something they work on so that they can basically use game theory and a lot of these other sort of technological hacks to basically sort of like simulate what you would do in the B system and then know all the countermeasures for it. And they use AI for that. So a lot of this, though, I do think is fear mongering and fear porn, and why it's important to once again just focus on hacking your reality, your own reality, and being the actor in on your own stage play, so that we don't fall into sort of the fear of like this has got control over us, you know. So,
Amen.
and that was another thing I found out about the book, that you were a thespian at one point.
Oh yeah, I did a bit of acting in high school. Yeah,
You were a
played
drama
Puck
kid.
in a Midsummer Night's Dream. Yeah, drama was my savior by the time I hit 15, 16. Finally found a group of weirdos that I could resonate with.
Oh, that's great, man. Well, hey guys, go get the book. I appreciate you so much, Mike. I'm really bummed I'm not going to be
Likewise.
with you in with all you guys in Mexico this year, but hopefully we get to hang out again soon in person.
Yeah, I'd love that. I'm not sure. I probably will not make it to Confluence this year, but at some point our paths will cross. I know.
Yes, they will. It may be on a mountaintop overlooking an ancient tree or something, but we'll make it happen. I do want to
Awesome.
come explore the caves in the mountain up by you too. So.
Oh, speaking of positive use of AI, someone just yesterday, I shared it on my Instagram and I shared it on my YouTube channel as well. Someone took a photograph of Mont Go, the Elephant Mountain, and used AI to make it wake up and stand up. And
That's
it's
amazing.
so realistic looking, and it's
Well, what a
really
trip.
awesome. So there are some. Usually, I'm just like annoyed when I see a lot of the AI stuff, but that one was dear to my heart. So check
That's
that out.
amazing.
It's a short on my YouTube channel.
I'd love to see that. That's great. I'll check it out. Okay, Mike. Hey, thanks so much, buddy. Have a great night. And hey, guys, thanks for listening. We love y'all.
Yeah.
Peace.
Take care, everybody. Bye.